Ladies and gentlemen, you are now entering the Decent Christian Talk podcast. Enjoy.
Well, here we are. It's the Decent Christian Talk podcast. Glad that you have joined us. We are talking about this episode, which is going to be about the best releases from 2015. So, I would encourage you really to check out some of these albums that we're going to discuss. Some albums that were surprising, some that were disappointing, and the ones that stood out the most for me. So, before we get into that, I would just like to mention that if you haven't subscribed to DecentChristianTalk.com, what are you doing? You got to do it. It's free. All you got to do is go to DecentChristianTalk.com. On the right toolbar, right-hand side of the screen, all you have to do is put in your email address. And every single time we post, whether it's a podcast or just an interview that we do, you'll get an email letting you know what we did. That way it kind of helps you keep in touch with us, lets you know what we're doing, and it's free. I mean, who doesn't like free? If you haven't done so already, and I know you haven't, don't lie to yourself. I know you haven't. Go to iTunes and subscribe to the Decent Christian Talk podcast. And for goodness sakes, push pause on this right now and leave us a review before you listen any further. Go on. I'll be waiting. I mean, I'm not going to be going anywhere. If you want to give us a 5-star rating, that wouldn't be that bad of that would be good. That would be great. But we would really appreciate that. That helps us out. If you would go to iTunes and subscribe and give us a good review. But yeah, without further ado, here is episode 9 of the Decent Christian Talk podcast.
All right, hit that horn, babe. Let's dance.
All right, so we are looking at the year of 2015, and what a year it was. Actually, to be honest with you, I think many people might consider it a down year, and that's fine. I mean, I definitely can see that. I mean, I'm someone that is that type of person that makes, those playlists. You go on Spotify, and you can make those playlists, and I always make like a best of playlist for each year, and I kind of do that as the year goes on. And I'll admit that the playlist for 2015 is a little smaller than most years, and maybe that I can attribute that to being a little busier this year, but I do think it may have been a bit of a down year. But we're going to look at the year of 2015 and talk about some of the songs and some of the albums that kind of came out. Starting with January, we can look at Hillsong Young and Free. They released an EP called This Is Living. Kind of a sneak peek, I think, at an album that they're going to release soon, a full-length album. And I'm looking forward to that. Bethel Music released a We Will Not Be Shaken. And I think it's probably one of the better worship records of the year. I'm not really into a whole lot of worship music lately. I just think a lot of it is not creative, but I guess that would be one of the top ones for me this year, from the past year. Derek Minor released a record called Empire. I believe it is his first album that he released independently. A really good album. We interviewed him this past year. You can check that out. One of the highlights of the year for me. I'm a Pittsburgh Pirate fan, and going up to see them hearing one of his songs is one of the songs that one of the players picked to play when they come up to the plate. It's kind of cool to see that impact that guys like Derek Minor have. I think that's about it for January. We move on to February here. Let's see. One of the things that I saw that stuck out to me was a release from Aaron Gillespie. And I would think this would probably be one of the more disappointing releases of the year for me. I've liked everything that Aaron has released since leaving Under Oath, especially with the Almost. I liked the Worship record that he put out a couple years ago. This one kind of fell flat for me, to be honest. Another album that was released that I would consider probably the Worship album of the year would be by The Brilliance, the record called Brother. If you've not heard of The Brilliance before, I would encourage you to check them out, especially if you like Gungor. It's actually Michael Gungor's brother is the lead vocalist in The Brilliance. So if you like Gungor, you'll definitely like The Brilliance. Matt Carney released a record called Just Kids at the end of February. Again, this was one of the records that kind of fell short for me. I really liked the album that he put out before. Can't remember what that was called, but there was a lot of great songs. It seems like with Matt Carney, it's always been a good album, and then a kind of not-so-good album, and then a good album, and then a not-so-good album. So, I don't know. Hopefully, I'm not giving up on him or anything. I think he's a talented guy. This is just an album that just didn't hit well for me. Kevin Max, moving on to March now, Kevin Max released Broken Temples. It's his first full-length release since leaving Audio Adrenaline. Just so you know, Kevin Max did leave Audio Adrenaline. It's amazing how many people still don't know that. Anyway, that's a different topic for a different day. It's a great album. It's one of my favorite records of the year. I think he definitely pushed the envelope when it comes to the music. And this was a lot of these songs that are on this album were supposed to be for the next Audio Adrenaline album. And, you know, it's kind of disappointing to see how they've gone since he's left. I really wanted to see that chapter of Audio Adrenaline go a little bit longer, but luckily for us, we still get to hear the music because Kevin Max is still releasing good music. So that's good. He released the deluxe album a little bit later in the year that had a lot of other good songs on it, and kind of showed his cards as far as I think what he's trying to come out with in the future, with a lot more electronic flair and kind of 80s new wave, and I'm excited to see where that goes. Also in March, Jonathan Tulin put out Science Fiction. I think this is probably one of the biggest surprises of the year. I really loved the work that he put into this album. Speaking of Kevin Max, he has a track on this album. Really good album. Really encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. If we're going to look at secular releases for March, this is also the month that Kendrick Lamar put out an album called To Pimp a Butterfly, and it's really a groundbreaking album in many respects. A lot of Christian hip-hop artists have commented on it that they enjoyed that album. It's not for everybody, but a lot of the commentary on that album has been important for a lot of people, and I thought it was worth noting that he released that album in March as well. Continuing on with March, Pacific Gold released an album called Sing My Welcome Home. It's their first record on the Bad Christian Music label. We did an interview with them. I want to say sometime around that time last year. Really good album. If you're into hymns and you're into people that take creative liberties with hymns, I think they did a really good job on that record. A couple other records that came out in March. NF released his debut full-length record called Mansion. Really good album. One of the best hip-hop albums of the year for sure. It's encouraging to see a major label sign a guy, and for the hype to live up to what it was. And I'm excited to see what he's going to come out with. I know he just announced he's putting out another album really soon, so I'm excited to see where NF goes. Steve Taylor also released Goliath, the deluxe edition, in March. I usually don't really look at deluxe albums a whole lot, or at least, I mean, I look at them, but if I've already bought the album, I don't really care for them that much. But this deluxe album was really worth it. Yeah, let's see. We're moving on to April. Speaking of deluxe albums, the Rapture Ruckus group put out their album Invader. Again, another one of the biggest surprises of the year. It kind of was an album that I thought was it was a combination of a couple EPs that they released a year before, and I think you can tell that because a lot of the songs, there's definitely a separation between two groups of songs, and one kind of has a Rage Against the Machine vibe to it that I really like, and I really dug those set of songs. Wasn't really into the softer songs a whole lot, but the harder songs for me really was awesome. Children 18-3 released Come In. I don't know if this is their last album. We interviewed them in the summer last year. When that album first came out, they said it was their last album. When we talked to them in June, they said, I'm not real sure. They're currently on tour with 7 Day Slumber. They're still together, so I don't really know what the future holds for them. I don't know that they even know, to be honest. KB released Tomorrow We Live. It wasn't what I expected, but it was still a good album. I kind of expected him to go along the lines a little bit more of a Lecrae, but he kind of added his own fingerprints to it, which is good. I don't think it fell on. I don't think it was hyped, or I don't think it was as favorable to a lot of people. Yeah, but I think it was one of those albums that over time really grew on people, and that's including me. I got a chance to talk with him last year as well, and it's really good to see his heart, and the messages behind the songs on that album are just really, some of them are gut-wrenching. I mean, he touches on some really hard subjects. So we're going to move on to May. Audio Adrenaline released a record, Sounds of the Saints. We're not going to talk about that. Citizens and Saints released Join the Triumph, the deluxe edition. Really good album. One of my favorite records of the worship genre of the year. They came out of the Mars Hill breakup, and it's good to see that they are still around, along with another band that we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's good to see that. Plum released Exhale. It's kind of, and when I talked with her, I interviewed her this past year as well, and I asked her about it being a worship album, and she said, well, it's not really, I don't really see it as that, but it really definitely has that worship vibe to it, more so than anything that she's released. But I definitely like that the fingerprints that she has put on that album still makes it seem like something that she wants to do and not something that the record company is pushing her to do. And I really like that. Definitely worth checking out. Abandoned Kansas released Alligator. One of my favorite rock albums of the year, for sure. They really pushed the envelope. I think this is their first full-length album since leaving p.o.d Records. And there was a lot of pent-up frustration. We got to talk to Jeremy from a band in Kansas, and you can read about that on our website, decentchristiantalk.com. But he had a lot of pent-up frustration from, I think, just the whole business side of the music industry as a whole, and I think that really came out in that album. One of the most exciting and surprising EPs of the year was by Wolves at the Gate. They released an acoustic EP called Reprise. And I just want to say this. I'm not one of those people that likes when bands just put out an acoustic style of, like, an acoustic remix of songs that they've already released. A lot of times, to me, it's not that good. It's just something that they've put out. It seems like that because they just wanted to have something to sell. This is not the case for this EP. This was an EP that really was put together very well. They brought in some extra vocalists from other bands to add something new to the songs as well. Really one of my favorite pieces of the year, to be honest with you. Thought they did a very good job, and I hope they continue to do EPs like that, maybe in between their records. One of the guys on this record was the lead vocalist of Emery, who also put out an album in May called You Were Never Alone. Emery is one of those lightning rod bands that is not for everybody. Matt and Joey have put out... Matt and Toby, have put out their podcast within the last couple of years that have really kind of... it's been good and bad for a lot of people. And we got a chance to talk to Matt about that on our website. You could check that out. But the album itself is one that I enjoy. It's really good, and I'm really encouraged by what has been put out on the label. I mean, we've already talked about a lot of the releases on that label with this Emery release. A band in Kansas, we talked about Pacific Gold earlier, and to be honest, we're not done talking about the label. There's other releases coming out that we're going to talk about. Also that released on this day as the Emery record was the 21 Pilots release called Blurry Face. Maybe my favorite album of the year. And I'll just be honest with you, the first time I listened to it, I was like, I don't know that I liked it. But I'm telling you, every time I've listened to that album since, I've grown to like it even more. And I really like the stuff and the messages that they put through. I got a chance to see them the fall before this record was released. So I guess it would be the fall of 2014. And man, I fell in love with them. They're one of those bands that I hope stick around forever. I just really like the message that they put out, and there's a lot of people that they've influenced positively. John Foreman had his first set of EP releases in May of the Wonderlands, I'm just going to mention them all right here. There was I don't know that I enjoyed these EP sets as much as his season ones that he released a few years ago. But there's still probably at least 2 songs on each EP that really hit home for me. So definitely, I think he has a package on his website where you can purchase all 4 of them. It's definitely a worth doing. You probably get 25, 26 songs doing that. Definitely worth it. Hillsong United released Empires. Can't say that this was one of my favorite albums of the year. This I would probably chalk up to one of the more disappointing ones. I don't know, it just didn't really connect with me that well. I don't know that I can really put a finger on why. but I didn't enjoy it as much as some of their releases of the last couple of years. So now we're going into June here, getting into the summer months. Let's see. Ongoing Concept released a record called Handmade. Really one of the more unique releases of the year. I can't say it's a genre that I really like personally, but it's one of those albums that it's so unique that it's going to be relevant for that reason. And we got a chance to talk to those guys, and they're just really, I think they're really interested in creating something unique, and it's good for what it is. It really is. Also in June, the August Burns Red Band put out a record called Found in Faraway Places. And again, this is not a genre that I am really into, but I can really appreciate what August Burns Red has done, and I definitely can appreciate that. And we got a chance to do a 2-part interview with August Burns Red that's worth checking out on our website. But man, this is definitely a record worth checking out. Going into July, let's see here. I don't really see much in July worth mentioning, to be honest with you. There's a couple deluxe editions that we already touched upon. Amberlin released a live record based off their Cities album, which is definitely worth checking out. So we're just going to move into August, and we got a big heavyweight coming up in August with p.o.d releasing This Is Not a Test. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm a big p.o.d fan. Have been since the DC Talk days. Obviously, us at Decent Christian Talk love p.o.d. Having said that, his release, Eye on It, was just not one that I can say that I really enjoyed. And it was just one of those really radio-friendly albums that I just did not really care for. There was a song or two that I liked, and other than that, I was really disappointed with that album. This Is Not a Test completely blew me away. This is his best release. Really is. And I'm not just saying that. I thought about, I went back and I listened to the Diverse City album and Momentum. Really, two of my favorite p.o.d albums, and I think that This Is Not a Test might be better than both of them. And not just because DC Talk has a track on it, which I love, for sure. But I think that this album, just in general, I think it's his best album. I think this album shows a lot of maturity. I think it shows a lot of nostalgia. I think it does, at the same time, does a good job of highlighting what p.o.d is doing now. It has pop, but not too much. It has rap, but not too much. It's just a really good mixture. Really good album. One of my favorites of the year for sure. Pillar and p.o.d in August. Two blasts from the past for me. Two bands that I want to say probably 10 years ago were two of my favorite bands. They released on the same day. They both released an album. Pillar released an album called One Love Revolution. p.o.d released an album called The Awakening. If I had to pick out of those two albums which one to listen to, I would pick Pillar. They're both good for what they are. I fell in love with both of those bands when they were really into the rap. When they mixed the rap and the rock together. And when both of those bands kind of moved away from that, for whatever reason, just didn't like it as much. But anyway, both worth checking out, especially if were a fan of those bands. It had a release from Ren Collective called As Family We Go. I don't know that I enjoyed this album as much as their last one, but it's still really good. Good little Irish band that I've definitely enjoyed over the years. Again, we're going to touch up on one of the bands from Marcel called Ghost Ship. Again, one of my favorite worship releases of the year called Costly. And I know I said that I don't really care for the worship genre, but I'm saying that I like this worship release a lot on this podcast, aren't I? But anyway, this is a good release. This is their first release since the Marcel breakup, and it's really about sacrifice. It's really about adoption. It's really a good album. I definitely enjoyed it for sure. It's worth checking out. We talked to the lead vocalist of Ghost Ship earlier in the year last year, and I just really like to hear his heart after that Marcel breakup, and it's good to see what God is doing in that situation. So we're moving into the fall months here, going into September here, and let's see. Well, we got a released from Tree 63, their first release in a long time, called Land. They did a pledge music or some kind of a Kickstarter campaign that we kind of helped promote. I'm really proud to say that they completed that. And this is a very good album. It was really good to see this band come back. Some of those tracks, it just sounds like they picked up where they left off, and I really enjoyed this release. Zealand Worship. We just featured Phil Joel in an interview last month, and man, I've been dying to talk to that guy because I have missed hearing his voice. I know he's released a lot of solo records, but this release just completely encaptured the heart of Phil Joel for me. And man, when I say that I don't like worship, maybe I'm wrong. I'm a worship leader at the church, and don't get me wrong, it's just there's a lot of stuff that has been watered down over the years, and I'm glad to see this movement of worship this past year, and this includes Zealand Worship that is just so genuine to me. You have to check this out. This is probably my favorite worship release of the year. I think I've said that 6 times now on this podcast. Andy Mineo released Uncomfortable. I don't want to say this was disappointing. It just wasn't what I expected. I kind of expected a more aggressive version of his last record. And I think his EP that he released last year kind of was trending in that direction, and I kind of think he pulled back a little bit, to be honest. With the exception of the title track Uncomfortable, which was, dang, that was heavy for me. That was really good. Don't get me wrong, there's a few tracks on this record that I liked, but I'd have to say overall I was a little disappointed with this record. Now, if we want to talk about hip-hop records that I did like, and Jay Gibbons released Fly Exam, definitely one of my favorite releases of the year in the hip-hop genre. Really good for me. He really touched on a lot of, much in the same way that Kendrick Lamar did, Jay Gibbons touched on a lot of really good commentaries that I think are very relevant. We're moving on to October here. One of my favorite releases of the year came out in October by Mute Math. Really good release. You have to check this out. Really have loved following the career of Mute Math even since the early days when a couple of them were in a band called Earthsuit. But this was definitely one of my favorite releases of the year. You have to check this out for sure. Capital Kings released 2, which ironically was their second full-length release on p.o.d Records. If you like EDM, you have to check this out. I definitely think that they have matured quite a bit since their last release, which I really liked. But I think this one is on a whole nother level, to be honest with you. I really like the collaborations that they did with KB. Really unique collaboration with Chris Tomlin that I really liked. And it's not one of those records that is what you would call a sophomore jinx, for sure. Let's see here. Touch up on a couple things here. For today, released Wake, which was a pretty good record. Seventh Day Slumber released an EP called Redline, which was one of the more surprising releases for me. I really liked that EP. I think they pushed their boundaries and created something that they haven't created before. They kind of got back to the roots, but kind of pushed that a little bit. So check that out. Holland, one of Toby Mac's new release. Toby Mac's new signees released an EP that was a precursor to a full-length album. No, it wasn't. She didn't release a full-length album yet, did she? Anyway, it's a good release, worth checking out. I especially like the remix she did of the Lecrae song, All I Need Is You. You got to check that out. And, we're winding down here. There's a couple releases in October. Crowder released a live EP called Neon Porch Extravaganza. Worth checking out. Going into November, Kevin Max released Starry Eyes Surprise. Another thing that he did as a crowdfunding campaign. He went back to his roots. Growing up listening to a lot of new wave rock, and man alive, if you've heard the David Bowie album that he released before his death, and you put that on along with Starry Eyes Surprise, they kind of go hand in hand together. They really do. I really liked this release. Let's see. Going into the end of November, Five Iron Frenzy released a surprise kind of B-sides EP called Between Pavement and Stars. Really like this release. There's 2 or 3 tracks on here that are just absolute gold for me. You have to check that out, especially if you've been a Five Iron Frenzy fan over the years. Got to check this out. But really, that really wraps it up for the year as we know it in 2015. If you've not checked out some of these releases that I've mentioned, I would just really encourage you to check that out. But thank you for listening to this podcast. We looked through an entire year in about a half an hour. So I'm going to get a drink of water because my throat is parched. Thank you for joining me.
Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses. Thanks.